Well, that previous presentation really leads us into wellness very, very well, and I am very excited to be here with this wonderful panel. We met beforehand and talked, and we have so much in common, so I want to jump right into it. We are going to introduce ourselves first, and then we're going to let each person kind of tell us kind of where they see things from their perspective. Again, my name is Tanya Jolliffe, and I am the founder of LIT Wellness Solutions, and we bring health coaching and consultation to corporations, mostly transportation industries. You want to start?
Thank you so much for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Meenu Bassi. I'm the founder and the CEO for LRS Wellness. The mission is revolutionizing wellness by empowering others. And that's empowering you, each one of you, for the product, services, and technology that you offer to the consumer. That's also empowering the consumer who look to receive your services and use your services. My mission is, just like Jeff Bezos has delivered Amazon products to each and every home, my mission and vision is to deliver wellness services to each home across North America.
Colleen?
Good morning, everyone. Colleen Greco. I am the one and only joyologist. That's a term that I developed when I looked at wellness as a whole. I believe it is a mind, body, soul approach. And everything I do is grounded in joy. So I coach individuals and corporations to redirect their response to triggers and reroute them back to a source of joy. Thanks for having me.
I'm Nathan Price. I'm the Chief Science Officer for Thorne Health Tech, which is a public company focused on delivery of what we call scientific wellness, which basically uses testing, AI, and natural solutions aimed at prevention. I was a professor for about 15 years. I moved into the private sector about 3 years ago, and I just wrote a book with Lee Hood called The Age of Scientific Wellness, which is from Harvard Press, that goes through kind of a remaking of the healthcare system towards a wellness orientation.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Ryan Rogers, president of the PTSD Foundation of America. At the PTSD Foundation of America, we specialize in the veteran, helping them deal with PTSD and many of the other co-occurring disorders that they have, and just really empowering them so that they don't just survive, that they thrive, and help them transition into a better life and live that better life that they deserve.
So from my perspective, wellness deals in making sure people are happy, healthy, productive, and really comes in both a microspheric and macrospheric components. Healthy individuals beget healthy communities, happy communities, productive communities. If you are safe from infection, from disease, you are free to be a better person, to really elevate yourself to work to what you want, to become more human. And really that's what I see wellness as, is making sure people are healthy so that they can be happy, productive, functioning members of their society and able to contribute, able to do well.
Thanks, Garrett. You kind of set up our next question, because one of the things we have to really talk about is if we're going to go back to the roots, we really need to understand where health and wellness kind of differ and where wellness really is that jumping off point. And because we're each coming at it from a different perspective, I want us to each look at our own perspective of that wellness component. And I'll start by giving, I worked for decades as a registered clinical dietitian, and I worked with end-stage organ disease and transplantation of the kidney, liver, and pancreas. And one of the things I discovered was that when we only are dealing with how many grams of carbohydrate a diabetic is consuming, or how much exercise they're doing, and how much protein someone's consuming, we're looking at the components, but we're not looking at the stress that induces those components. And so it became that wellness integration that really helped my clients to thrive and also made to move it out of that clinical setting. Each one of you has that same kind of perspective. So tell us how you look at wellness from that whole comprehensive area and how it impacts health and well-being in general.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Wellness to me is really a healed mind, body, and soul. A collective of all three all three components, mind, body, and soul. In my years of working in corporate as well as running my own business, what I've seen is that you may have one component but not the other. And now so more than ever before, especially post-COVID, mental health is what's become the biggest component. We have a smart generation of adults, children, everybody. The information is at our fingertips. What's important is how we utilize that information, and that's where we need to really get back to the roots and practice yoga, practice meditation, practice natural medicine, as well as respecting what all the advancements we have made in the medical industry. And so to me, wellness is a holistic approach of mind, body, and soul, and ensuring all three are healthy.
I like to say that I accidentally was in the IT industry for 25 years, and I was always service-oriented, and so joy was always at the core of everything I did. But we had a trauma in our house, and that obviously caused me to reevaluate. Caused me to reevaluate my situation, and felt that it was my calling to help people pull themselves out of a situation that just seems unsolvable. And I had hired a nutrition coach to help me, because obviously as this trauma unfolded, I ate and drank my way up quite a bit. Maybe I just needed to come way back down. And so when I was going through that scenario, I said, don't you want to understand what caused me to gain that weight so I never go back there again? And he said, I'm not your therapist. And I thought, there it is. Like, that is the problem right there. It is a holistic approach, this mind, body, soul approach. If we don't look at that holistic approach, as I think you're both alluding to, then you're kind of like treating one portion of the problem. I can certainly teach anyone how to lose weight, but how do you keep it off? And how do you keep that as part of your past and never enter that cycle again? So really looking forward to an awesome discussion today.
Yeah, I come into this from the standpoint of wanting to understand and quantify health and wellness in a way that we can extend health span to as long as possible. So one of the things that I really believe is that our healthcare system is far too focused on being reactionary to disease, and that we wait until far too late to intervene, typically when costs and side effects are high and troublesome and efficacy is low. A piece I wrote for the LA Times a couple weeks ago focused on, for example, Alzheimer's prevention. And one of the things that you can think about there, just as an example of how we would think about, extending this from a wellness point of view, is that if you just imagine the difficulty of trying to recreate your brain once your neurons have died and your billions of synapses between them are lost, it's utterly fanciful, the idea that you can have a small molecule drug that will regrow that brain back to what it was. But if you think about wellness and prevention and the notion of how do you keep your brain alive and not let it fall into pieces, that is much, much more doable. And we've all known this since we were 3 years old because it's the story of Humpty Dumpty. And so basically this is what I'm just incredibly passionate about, and we've led studies on thousands of people, maybe the largest scientific studies of wellness to date, where we've really delved in and understand what your genome, your microbiome, your daily activities, what you can do, all the way accumulating into even digital twin models, which I'll talk about tomorrow in the AI session, that can simulate in advance what interventions can do in terms of the extension of health span and so forth. So it's an area I'm really excited about.
Well, I think for me, looking at this, we always, for those of us who are in the healthcare industry, we always want to try to find that magic bullet. We want to try to find that magic pill, that one thing that just that is a solution for all of the problems. But as we've kind of discovered, there is no such thing that exists. We have to really rethink our approach to trauma. I'll just ask a question. Has anyone in this room not had a traumatic event that has happened to them in their life? Yes. No one raised their hand. But it's something that every single person in this room encounters, but oftentimes we are not really given the correct, protocols or how to deal with those traumas effectively. And the other thing is too is that not every single person is going to have the same solution to a very similar problem. There has to be a one-size-fits-one approach. And that's not something in the healthcare industry that we like. We like the one-size-fits-all approach. It's just something that we're going to have to do and look at it very differently, because every single person in here is very dynamic and different, and so is their approach to dealing with trauma.
I completely agree. Different people have different needs. And if we really want to understand what wellness is, we got to ask, what is wellness? What is wellness on the low level, the granular level, the individual level? What do people need for their own conditions, such as everybody has trauma? But going for that, if we can help people on the individual level, how can we help people on the bigger societal level, community level? Sick societies beget sick people, and that's really where I think a lot of the root of wellness can be traced to, is how can we help the community to help the people? How can we make society healthier and more fit and more functional so that people are able to have better wellness, so that people are able to live better lives?
So one of the common things that I've heard as we've all talked is that, how I like to put it is, we're each an experiment of one. They're comparing with another person, our life experiences, our health genetics, all of our background, it's all unique. Several of you mentioned mind, body, soul. Okay, so that's a different way of looking at people. We look at health and we look at problems and we come up with solutions. So what we want to do is look at health, but through the wellness lens of solutions. I heard yoga, joy, community. So let's have a discussion about what are the ways we can begin to encourage our fellow attendees to begin to look at health problems from that wellness lens. So what's the first thing they need to do to look at through the wellness lens?
Very nice question. So what do you guys need to do? Maybe we should ask you guys, right?
Let's give them the tips. Let's give them at least one tip from each of us.
Absolutely. And I think just be real and authentic in what you do and who you are, and in your skin, in your, right? And for what you're here to do. We all have a purpose and passion, and as long as we stay true to ourselves and want to help the other person, whether it's a community or city or globally, and just be real, be truthful, and be mindful that anything that we do and that you do, that there is a win-win situation for all. And if there is a win-win situation, then there will be a reduction of traumas. So it's really basic, right? Be a nice person, be a good human being, and take those assets and capabilities that we have and extend it beyond our homes, extend it to our communities, extend it to our provinces, statewide and countrywide. And there's a pool of talent here in every aspect, from services, products, and technology we offer, and I can't emphasize this enough, but it's all fragmented. We really need to come together and be that Amazon. And together we can be that Amazon, more powerful than Amazon, because products are still something that's material that sits there. But when we can collectively offer our wellness services globally, that's when we make that shift. And that's when our healthcare industry needs to make that shift. We just gone through a pandemic where everybody was left on this stranded boat or yacht or whatever it was, but we were all in the same water. But we want to make sure that any other pandemic that comes, that there is a centralized system that people can tap into and say, this is what I need help with, and this is what I need. Tap of a finger, right? Or tap of a button. Yes.
So people come to me for a variety of reasons, but generally it starts with, I just want to lose weight. And, I would say the vast majority are working moms with kids that are around 6 or 8 years old that started to figure out that they've let themselves go. But as they start to lose the weight, all of the emotions come back up, and that's where I go with this mind, body, soul approach. So I do a lot of mindset coaching in terms of getting people to address those triggers, address the situations or the stories that they tell themselves. By redirecting the response to triggers, they're no longer running to a pantry. The weight starts to come down, and they also heal themselves from, in one of my stories that I have carried around for the past 40 some odd years, I was able to put that to rest. It doesn't bother me anymore. It isn't something I self-soothe with food anymore. But I think when you talk about, the first couple of things that you can do, I always tell people, you start your day with a quick meditation. You can roll your eyes, but I was anti-meditation myself. I do it for about 10 minutes every day just to ground myself.
Oops.
Why is it when I'm talking? Enough about me, back to me. So I tell people, just start meditating, just ground yourself. All you have to do, maybe you've had a bad night's sleep or you had a fight with your spouse and pulling that story back up. By meditating, you do a quick grounding exercise. Then you can go into a quick amount of journaling. Just start your day off kind of in a really non-threatening way. It really makes a difference in the way you approach your day. So I would say those two things. Even if you don't address your nutrition or the stories that keep you stuck, start with that. And then when you feel like that is kind of in a state where you do it in terms of a routine, then you can look at food. Then you can look at your workout. You can look at your mindset. But I wouldn't tackle it all at once. I would kind of do it in piecemeal, and that's how you keep the weight off long term.
Yeah, I think, if you're coming at this from a wellness perspective, one of the interesting things is when you look at these big quantitative studies of what is most predictive about your health span. I know if people know this, right? It's not whether or not you don't smoke or you don't drink or whatever. Sociality is the number one predictor. So whether or not you have a sense of purpose and whether you have people in your life that you love and you love to be with is the actual number one predictor of length of life. Some of the other things that I'll just add, that I know something about that, if you're trying to look at, ways to, enhance your health. And one of the things that's really valuable is to look at things like molecular data, like genetics. Genetics, I think, has been very missold to the public, at least certainly early on, as kind of this crystal ball that will tell you how you're going to die, right? Because it's so focused on disease. But it actually gives you a lot of insight into how your body operates. So one of the things we looked at, excuse me, when we were analyzing thousands of people going through a wellness program, and we were actually looking at things such as their rates of aging and things of that nature. But we also looked at a lot of biomarkers, like could you lower your LDL cholesterol, for example, which is used for millions of people who are on statins. Could you lower that by lifestyle intervention? And if you look at that in these studies, it comes out, you kind of can, it's kind of a mixed bag. But as soon as you start incorporating something like genetics, what we showed was that you could predict in advance who would succeed at being able to lower their cholesterol levels by lifestyle and who wouldn't. And it turns out it's totally predictable by your genetics. And the thing that matters is if you have a gap. So your genome can predict your LDL level. And if there's a gap in what your genome predicts and where you're at, you can move it. And if there's not a gap, then you can't. So one of the really useful things you can do is you can build a map for every person of your genetic predictions across basically everything in healthcare and what your actual levels are. And you can rank order those in a way such that you can have access to what are all the things that you could focus on in your health where your genome would work with you rather than against you. And it gives you a personalized plan for how you can optimize your health and understand, what are the risks that you have in your future, but most importantly, how you can navigate around them.
2 words: self-care.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most overlooked, underutilized, and misrepresented words is self-care. Because here's the reality of it. If you're not well, everyone else around you is not well either. There's that reciprocity that happens when, as an individual, you're not taking care of yourself, and those things tend to spill out to everyone else around you. It's almost viewed as like that's selfish if I take care of myself. Well, it's actually not. Especially in American society, we are so busy with things, doing things, busy with work, busy with this, that even tying back to everything that they talked about, right? Nutrition. I'm so busy that I don't have the opportunity to eat right, so therefore, what do? I eat things that are not well for me, so again, this ties back to self-care. It's all connected, it's all interrelated. We can't look at it as just one little small piece, and this is the magic potion or pill for that. It's being able to take care of ourselves, and for one, I'm not going to be the one to go run out and do a marathon. That's not me. That's not self-care. That would actually probably cause more stress and do more harmful things for me than somebody who's out running a marathon. More power to them. Like, they can do that. But that's not me. That's not what's going to be wellness for me. That's not what's going to be self-care for me. That's not what's going to help me decompress for the day and to become unbusy and maybe connecting with community. There's so many different pieces that are connected and interrelated within this. Self-care is absolutely vital for each of us that sit in this room.
I agree. Self-care is extremely important. If you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of others? If you don't take care of yourself, how can you be the best version of yourself? If you don't take care of yourself, how can you work on things that make you more human, that make you really more of what you are or what you want to be? And you can also just take a second, look at the person next to you. You don't have to look them in the eye, but look at the person next to you. You probably don't know them. Maybe you do. I don't know if you do or not, but you know that they have a life. You know that they have experiences. You know that they're going through things right now. So you have to understand they're doing as best they can, just like you are, to take care of themselves, to better themselves, to improve themselves, to really just not just make it through, not just to survive, but to thrive. We all want that on some level.
One of the things that, connectionally I see is what I have found in my own experience is, again, an experiment of one. Healthcare has looked at physical well-being, the dimension of physical well-being, what people eat, how much they exercise, the medications that they take, if they go to a doctor. Okay, COVID brought out looking at mental well-being. But really what most of us know is the dimension of emotional well-being is necessary. You can't get self-care if you don't understand what your triggers are. You can't even understand trauma, that you have had trauma. Many people think if it's not this horrible thing, then it wasn't trauma. And that's a lie, right? We can all attest to that. That's wellness, is helping people understand you have a past, you have a story, and it affects what you do and why you do it, and then how you do it. We can't make long-term lifestyle well-being change if we don't understand ourselves. We can't make self-care. We can't make those changes. We have to look at economic and financial dimension. We have to look at that financial dimension of wellness. We have to look at environmental wellness. We have to look at relational wellness. People overeat because they're triggered because of a relationship. Let's look at it. They drink, they use medications incorrectly. So let's look at that from that multidimensional phase. Let's move beyond, the physical, because the physical manifestations are all those other dimensions. And that's where healthcare has to go. That's where you have to help that person understand. I work in corporate, right? Corporate wellness. And you've got interactions between coworkers. And somebody's triggered by something that was said. They don't recognize they were triggered, and they're going off on their boss. Helping them understand what was said that triggered them and helping them work through that is that relational well-being. It helps the workplace, it helps the individual, it helps self-care. So let's talk a little bit about how we can help healthcare bring in all those dimensions of wellness for the well-being of the individual to accomplish the things that we have just mapped out that we want to help them accomplish. What is some ways we can bring those together? I just gave an example of helping somebody who is stressed to be able to understand why they just went off on somebody. Because it goes back to their own self-care, it goes back to their own previous experiences. What are some other things that come to your guys' mind?
Mindfulness. Be mindful of what you do, your each action, every step you take. Where is the second step going to lead you? Mindfulness of your body, your mind, your soul, and taking that. And once you're in your own authentic self and you're comfortable, that's when you can give to others. And that is, yes, it comes to self-care. But prior to that is really being mindful of others as well as yourself. Right? And in the future of wellness, yes, we're talking about all of these great things, but where is it all going to go, right? Are we all really just going to go in our home and just say, yes, I attended this conference and I got great pictures and social media looks great? But beyond that, what are we going to do? Where is the follow-up in this? Where is this information going to go? There's so many astounding, smart brains and souls out there. But how are they connecting? And that's where LRS Wellness wants to come in and help you, the great minds, connect you and those who want to help others, bring you the consumer and say, yes, this is a set of proof that they need help. And give those consumers transparency, and those that are giving the services, give them the accountability. Labor shortage has been a huge problem simply because people are focusing more within, right? They want to get to know their self, their body, their mindfulness. But once you've achieved that, where are you taking it? Right? Where else are we going to take it? And that's the platform LRS wishes to build, where we can connect B2B and B2C and build a platform through being mindful of yourself and what's going on in your society.
When you asked that question, 2 words came to mind because I wanted to follow Brian's lead. The 2 words, perspective and connection. There are a lot of stats out there that I find completely alarming, and I did a presentation on Friday to a corporation, and so obviously it wasn't so much focused on nutrition as it was overall wellness, and the fact that burnout is a medical diagnosis, which is probably not something I have to share with this room, but productivity is at a 75-year low. Loneliness is the latest healthcare epidemic, right? All of these things are connected, but we are hardwired as humans for connection, and we are the loneliest, least productive, burnt out society ever. So when we talk about needing to get back to the roots, and I think, Brian, you said it too, that there's no magic pill. It's going back to the basics and making sure that you are taking care of yourself first. I think you were talking about you can't pour from an empty cup. Maybe not your exact words, but that's what you were saying. Right? So you've got to make sure that, you've got your mask on first before you help other people. Or you're giving the worst version of yourself to those people. And those are people that you love. Those are people that are supposed to get the best versions of you. They're actually getting the worst. And I think when it comes to, corporate culture, I think we need perspective. I think we need to understand. It brings me back to a story that I had years ago when I was being a therapist, and he used to work at NASA. And this guy behind him had this huge pile of papers. And he's like, he's the busiest guy, and everybody needed him for all kinds of things. And one day he didn't come into work because he died of a massive heart attack, and his desk was clean by 11 a.m. Like, that should give us all perspective. That is not the stuff that matters. And I always try to tell clients, the thing that people say about me during, my funeral, that's the stuff I want to focus on every single day. It's not, what a great joyologist I am, or when I was in corporate IT marketing, that I, delivered the best results. It's, that I'm empathic, I'm compassionate, I have great friendships. Those are the things that matter. I'd love to see us get back to those things.
Yeah.
It was you this time.
Wow. Yeah, it was me this time. Okay.
Well said.
Yeah.
That's an exclamation
attention,
point if ever I heard
Talk
one.
about a mic drop.
Yeah, exactly. I'll try not to do that again. Yeah, I'll just follow on that on a few different ideas. So, one is that as we've with this focus on wellness, there is a lot of need within the healthcare industry for embracing, I think, other care practitioners that can really help with that. A company I co-founded some years ago called Aravel, for example, we employed about 50 health coaches that were really wonderful people. I say if you want to have a pretty happy life, one thing you can do is found a company filled with wellness coaches, because they're like the happiest, most positive people you could imagine. You could always find them. But we did find that just that interpersonal interactions, that you were able to get very significant improvements in people's health. We used a biological age metric as one of the ways that we would track people's health, and we saw women got better at 1.5 years per year on average in the program. Men got better at 0.8 years per year on average relative to chronologic age, so there was improvements that people went through health. The other thing I'll just mention, and this relates back to what we did in sociology, some of the stuff that Colleen's talked about and so forth, and I do think that there's probably my favorite book ever, well, maybe just other than mine, but my favorite book that I've read, that I didn't write, is a book that's probably pretty familiar to people. It's called Flow, Living at the Peak of Your Abilities by, and I can never say, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I always kill his name, which is too bad because he's such a hero. But basically, one of the things he talks about is trying to live your life in a way that's autotelic. I don't know if you're familiar with this word. I only know it really from his book. But things that are autotelic are, what would you do with your life if there was no reward, right? You don't hold your baby daughter in your arms because you get a prize at the end. It's autotelic. It means that it is what is meaningful. It's your reason for being alive. It's the stuff that you only care about with no sense of what it leads to. And I think that from a wellness perspective, it's one of the reasons that is my favorite book, is because if you can focus as much of your life as possible on those things that are autotelic to you, that you would just do forever for their own sake, that's what I think really leads to wellness in a deep way.
What is the one thing that after you use, not necessarily the one thing, but what is one thing that after you use you can never get back? Time. One of the things that I absolutely, the American culture is pretty awesome in many regards, but then it also sucks in others. In a lot of other cultures, they're event focused, not time focused. Now, for some of you that are clinicians, it's not about event, it's about time. You have a certain amount of time to get what you need to get out of that individual, give that individual, and it's in that small block of time. But as you know, people are dynamic. It takes time. It takes a lot of work to explore what is going on with them. It takes a lot of time to work out. And it should be more, event-based. What is it going to take in order to get this individual to the right place? But that's a very difficult thing, especially, if you've been raised in the Western culture. Everything is time. Everything is time. You have times to be, you have times to not be, and then everything is scheduled. And it's very difficult to have life and live and experience time and spend time with individuals whom need it when your time is eaten up by all of these different things. It's about how you're spending your time. And there's a monetization of time. Especially if you are a physician of some sort. Time is money. So how do you kind of balance the two of them? And there is a way to do it if it's not just solely focused on profit. If it's focused, there can be a balance, a very healthy balance of the two, of where you're focusing on the individual, and obviously, you got to pay bills. It's not like, the 60s where love, peace, and happiness, and that pays the full bills. That's not how it works. But spending the ample amount of time and the proper amount of time with that individual, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and sometimes even a 60 minutes, time frame for these individuals is not enough to get to the roots of what these individuals need to become better.
Ryan actually said it really well when he said people are dynamic. You have to be dynamic. You have to understand change is necessary, and you have to welcome it. If you stay the same person, or if you try to stay the same person, if you try and fight what's going on around you, you're not going to live a good life. You're not going to be healthy. You're not going to be well. That's really another big part of wellness, as far as I'm concerned, is not only understanding yourself, but being willing to change, to accept change within yourself and accept change around you. If you try and remain static, if you try and remain the same that you are right now, you're going to be miserable and you're going to suffer. But if you're able to adapt, you are able to evolve. Adaptation, change, that is what can make you better. That is what can improve your wellness. That is what can improve your health mentally, physically, on any level, is just willingness to accept change, willingness to go with it, and willingness not to fight what is happening inside you and around you. And if you can do that to yourself, you can help others do that too, because it's not just people that are dynamic. It is the world, the universe. Everything around you changes. The last presenter was talking about how your DNA changes every 40 seconds, so you are not the same person you were when you woke up this morning. That is very true. Everyone here, you are not the same person you were when you first walked into the room. You're not going to be the same person at the end of the day. What person are you going to be at the end of the day? What person are you going to be next week? How about the people around you? What kind of person are they going to be when this is over? Are you going to accept that and use that to better yourself? Or are you going to try and fight it and end up having a whole slew of problems that come with it?
Well, thank you, panel. You guys gave some wonderful, wonderful insights. We're going to use our last few minutes to allow you guys to ask any questions of the panelists. There is a microphone in midpoint back in the aisle. We would ask that you would go to that microphone and ask your question so that everybody can hear, and either direct it to the panel as a whole or specifically if that better suits.
Just want to, okay, it's on. I think it's on. I just want to thank the panel talking about wellness. My name is Sharice. I'm also a therapist. I'm from Pittsburgh. And I think as a whole, we all understand the importance of wellness. But something that I didn't hear was the impact of how systems affect our wellness, how corporations contribute to or struggle with self-care, how America doesn't really understand self-care and wellness. There have been so many corporations that I know I've worked for when I was working at my own business now. A lot of my colleagues work for where the priority, and individually we get self-care, meditate, we know how to do all of those things, but when you're working in a system that is sick, that is chaotic, that doesn't prioritize work-life balance. And like someone said, you gotta work, you gotta pay the bills. You can't pay the bills with peace, joy, and happiness. Like, what do you wanna do? So how do we, I think when we're talking about wellness, we have to be able to address it systemically. Because individually, I think everybody in here gets it. So how do we address it systemically? And that's more of a rhetorical question. But I think, you know, with anything, we got to look at things structurally and systemically. So.
One thing I will throw out is that we have all lived in a diet culture. We have been in a diet culture for 30 years, and our systems, our corporations, our work environments are all diet culture based, and developing a wellness culture that makes it okay, that uses the employee assistance programs that are provided. Companies are providing us employee assistance programs, but they aren't being used. And one of the leading reasons they're not used is the stigma, the fear that it would affect their job and their longevity. So part of that has to be the leaders of those systems have to be willing to say, hey, we need to change this culture and make it part of our company's core values, that health and wellness will be part of their company's core values. And if anybody is looking to make that change, I would love to speak with you afterwards. So that's the one side of it, is that it's systemically, you're exactly right. We have to make a change. And we have to, as the leaders of those companies, we have to lead the charge to say, we can do it different, we must do it different, and part of our company core values is health health and wellness. Use that employee assistance program. It should be at 70% utilization, not 7% utilization.
Right, I agree with that. And I think there also needs to be checks and balances on these corporations, using maybe outsourcing to make sure that these corporations truly care about wellness the way they say they do.
Correct.
Surveying the employees and asking, what does work-life balance mean to you? Does your employer really prioritize work-life balance? Are you seeing a culture where people are anxious, they're scared, and performance is declining? Because that's largely, yeah, sure, employee assistance is great. Usually people get about 6 sessions, and then they're being plugged right back into this sick system. So until
Right.
we can do something to truly fix that or reorganize that, we're going to find ourselves right back in the same place, as we practice our individual self-care.
If I may add to that, the EAP program was designed post the war, when people adapted to alcohol. And EAP corporations implemented EAP to help these individuals. But in the modern society, the traditional EAP system is not working. That's why we have such low uptake. That's where we need to think beyond the traditional services that EAP systems have been offering and make it more mainstream, right? Think about yourself when you were going through that COVID situation and the pandemic. What were you craving? What was missing? What was the gap between our health system and the EAP system and what's available to the consumer? Our retail locations were closed, right? Everything went online. But where was the healthcare at fingertips? It was not available. So that's where corporations really need to think beyond the traditional services. And that's where LRS wants to partner with individuals who can offer those services. And one of the things we do is we offer beyond traditional EAP services to these corporations so their employees can actually go get a haircut, go use it in other aesthetic services for what they want, go do a meditation. Right now, it's very constrained. Even our insurance companies that offer these benefits to corporations, we get one benefit, maybe 2 or 3, dental, medical, and massage. There's more than that for healthcare. And that's where we want to work together, even educate these insurance companies that, look, put yourself in the situation, are you really able to survive on just these 3 services that you're offering your employees? There needs to be more, and just a broader mindset, broader thinking, and at a global scale. As much as the word global sounds scary, we're one source.
I see there's several other questions, and we may not have time to get to all of those. Do you have a brief question that we might be able to answer quickly?
I'll try and keep it brief. Hi, my name is Dr. Colin Fitzpatrick. I'm an orthopedic surgeon working in London, but also co-founder of Encode Health. We track and trace medical devices, and also doing some work in wellness outcomes through tracking, doing longitudinal studies in MSK. My question really is twofold. One, as a working clinician, I really identified what you said about dealing with a patient in front of me and trying to look at them as an entire being as opposed to just a knee or a hip. But actually, two questions really. One is, what do you say to my colleagues and myself who only really do have that 10-15 minute window to make our assessment, diagnosis, treatment plan, counsel the patient, consent the patient, talk through a procedure? You've got 10 minutes, 15 minutes to do all of that. How do you scaffold in a conversation about wellness into such tight time frame? And the second point is, how do you actually then make the point to the patient that actually really to look after your wellness and your well-being as an entirety, you have to take some responsibility for that. So as a clinician, I can perhaps advise you and guide you, but I can't tell you about your own wellness. I don't know you well enough to do that. And so how do we get the message across to our patient, which is hopefully what we're all here for anyway, to improve patient outcomes in whatever aspect? How do we get that message across to our patients that in actual fact, if you want to engage in your wellness, you have to do just that, engage in your wellness, take some responsibility, and perhaps come to us, the medical professional community, to help you and point you in the right direction with that. So those are my 2 questions.
That's a loaded question. Does somebody have a quick answer?
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on that. I think it's a great question. I don't think we should try to remake the way that, like your visit with your patient, and especially when they're coming in for an acute issue. I think the healthcare system works pretty well for that. But what I really see is that we need to have, what we call a scientific wellness industry, or you just want to call it a wellness industry or something like that, that is adjacent to healthcare, that is actually interfacing with people in their own lives and it's really focused on the extension of health span, because most doctors, right, they don't have the time, it's not built into the system is not set up for them to do those transactions. So it's a separate, and I actually think it should be the front end of healthcare essentially, which is focused on prevention and extension in a very different way, but then feeds into the acute disease care scenarios when that becomes important, which is what healthcare is today.
And that's where that whole health coaching side of it really comes in. And I would also see using a service pre to tie and connect with the medical condition that you're dealing with, to tie those together.
I mean, I agree. I think it's a longer discussion. My only riposte to that is, in coming to me with an acute healthcare issue, I actually create a chronic one by treating you surgically. And so actually, I have to be able to engage with your wellness over a longer period of time, and that can't be de-linked from what I do to you clinically. So I take your point, but I think there must be a bigger solution, and obviously it's a larger conversation.
It's a larger conversation in our 1 minute we have
Let's
got.
talk over lunch. Let's talk over
totally.
lunch.
Thank you.
Exactly.
As a former medical director on the payer side, one of the challenges that I'd like to hear you expand on is that to me, looking at it from where I was sitting, the evidence base on wellness programs is thin to non-existent. Al Lewis has been particularly critical of that, the founder of disease management. How do you address those issues, and what is that emerging evidence? The other thing is that, as well as the thinness of the evidence, the role of the compounding factors is key, because the things that we're studying are not running rats in a lab maze. They're people living in the real world with multiple factors. What have you come up with to address those, that complexity?
Well, I know one thing that was mentioned earlier today is trust. And if there's not trust, that they won't engage and move. I will tell you that in the corporate client that I'm working with right now, I have seen actually their engagement in assessments and working with health coaching to address those things went up 450%, but it took building trust and changing culture to be able to see that happen. It's not going to happen in 6 months. So if you're looking for that return in 6 months, it's going to take 1 year to 2 years. But 450% increase in 1 year by changing culture. So it's a longer term solution, but it's there. But you have to be in it for the long haul and build all of those systemic changes and cultural changes.
All of the leaders. Leadership at multiple levels, though, have to create psychological safety, and that isn't happening. So you have, your C-suite, but then that doesn't get cascaded throughout
Right.
the organization, and I can tell you that happens to me many times. So it's incumbent upon, the individual to establish boundaries, but it's also incumbent upon all of the layers of leadership to establish that psychological safety so people can take time for the things.
Quick.
Yeah, just really quick. So you address the evidence base, so I would say that's been the focus of my career, certainly for the last decade. So that's why we wrote this book, The Age of Scientific Wellness. The reason we call it Scientific Wellness is because of establishing that evidence base. It's published from Harvard Press, 350 references in there. We did the big wellness studies to establish validity. We published maybe 25 papers in Nature journals, which are incredibly hard to get into. And Lee Hood, who was my partner on this, won the National Medal of Science from President Obama. So we have delved into this in a really deep way. So I just want to bring that up. And we could get into much larger issues, but I actually think the traditional medical establishment has devalued certain elements of evidence base in wellness. That would be a longer conversation than we have right now. It gets into a whole bunch of issues, but I agree with your point, and there are a lot of cases where that needs to be strengthened. That is pretty much the focus of my life in terms of what I do professionally. But like that is a huge element that is getting better and better.
I am sorry, but we have gotten the notice. I will say I love that there is such energy around wellness, and would love for you to come and talk with any of us over lunch as we dive into what can we do. Panel, thank you for a wonderful and engaging conversation.